Okay, Chris. I mean, the first question that I want to ask you is a very simple and direct one. Is when did the Paris hip hop scene emerge and why?
To deal with when, first of all, hip hop in France generally, but in Paris specifically, has a quite a long history and goes back really to the beginning of the 1980s. The first signs of it developing, you have in France. There's an extensive network of free, so-called free radios. So these are radio stations that are granted a license to broadcast, but are sort of halfway between a commercial and a community radio station. And so a number of hip hop DJs make their first breakthrough by broadcasting on these free radio stations. So figures like Sydney, Dynasty, they use the fact that they've got connections with America and with New York in particular, or other cities in America. So they're making regular visits, they may be bringing records back, they're playing in clubs, and then they get this opportunity to broadcast, usually in weekly slots that aren't, they're not prime time slots, so they're late night on a Sunday or early morning slots, but they're getting their opportunities, and there is a connection being made between a music and a particular constituency, which starts to expand, and then that's when other more mainstream media organisations pick up on it. So particularly the main French television station TF1 asked Sydney, who's by now established as a club DJ and who regularly plays hip hop, they ask him to host a program called Hip Hop, which runs for a year or so from 1984 every Sunday lunchtime, and it's about an hour long, and it features regular slots about hip hop dance, about hip hop culture, visits to the Bronx to find out, report on what's going on actually in New York. But the big thing about it is the studio audience. So you get these young kids coming in from the suburbs, the outskirts of Paris. They regularly meet up at the studios of TF1. They see themselves on television. Sydney is one of the first black regular presenters on French national television. So you get a connection being made between particular parts of Paris, particular ethnic minority populations, young populations. So these are children of migrant populations or immigrants themselves who've arrived in Paris, find themselves living in these outer city suburbs, and they're beginning to see themselves. So so the why question is, I think, really, it's about a community, a constituency that are identifying with a representation of themselves for the first time. They're seeing and hearing a language that they speak. They're seeing a performance style that they identify with, and they're beginning to see themselves represented. So around these constituencies, groups, crews, posses, whatever you want to call them, grow up around certain activities, around tagging, graffiti, around hip hop dance, and from those groups will emerge the first more notable performers on the Parisian hip hop scene. And I guess 1990 can be seen as an important year, a breakthrough year, for several reasons. There's a moral panic in the summer of 1990 about youth gangs and youth violence. And as the media tries to get hold of and report on that scene, they also start to notice or find that the easiest people to talk to are people associated with hip hop, who give them an explanation or give them an understanding of, well, where does this violence, where does this gang culture come from, or actually put the moral panic in some kind of context. It's the moment when, for example, at Université Paris X, which is in Nanterre, Saint-Denis, on the outskirts of Paris, that students there start to demand that hip hop is studied on a curriculum, and then they get responses from some teachers. So you get a kind of an academic environment in which hip hop culture is beginning to be explored, and so the visibility of hip hop in France is progressing. There's also a moral panic about vandalism around graffiti and tagging and so on, because the town hall of Paris commits itself to cleaning up graffiti, which is spreading itself, particularly through the metro and suburban railway lines. And so you have, on the one hand, a set of negative connotations around hip hop. It's to do with violence and vandalism and graffiti and so on. But also another set of connotations which are very positive, to do with autonomy and creativity and expressivity, and the fact that a previously underrepresented minority constituency is finding itself represented. And I guess from the point of view of wider mainstream recognition in France, the real breakthrough year would be 1995, when MC Solar gets wins the Best Male Artist prize at the Victoire de la Musique Awards, which are kind of equivalent to the Grammys or the Brits Awards in France. So really, that long progression from the early 80s through to the mid-90s, you're seeing a progressive acknowledgement of hip-hop culture in Paris. At times, it'd be more focus on dance. At other times, it'd be more focus on tagging and graffiti. But then finally, it allowed to break through for certain rap performers and rap groups to achieve a certain sort of commercial success.